Joseph's dream. Now Jacob dwelt in the land where his father had sojourned, in the land of Canaan. This is the genealogy of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was shepherding the sheep with his brothers. Now the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons, because he was the son of his old age. He also made him a tunic of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak civilly to him. Then Joseph had a dream and reported it to his brothers. Thus he said to them, "Hear this dream I dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And indeed, your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf." So his brothers said to him, "Shall you indeed reign over us, or shall you indeed have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Look, I have dreamed another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me." So he told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream? And what is this dream you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come and bow down on the ground before you?" And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Joseph is sold into Egypt. Then his brothers went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers shepherding the sheep in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." So he said to him, Here I am." Then Israel said to him, "Go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the sheep, and bring back word to me." So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Now a certain man found him, and there he was, wandering in the field. So the man asked him, saying, "What are you seeking?" He replied, "I am looking for my brothers. Tell me where they are feeding their sheep." The man said to him, "They have departed from here, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. Now, when they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. Then they said to one another, "Look, this dreamer is coming. Come, therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit. And we shall say, 'Some wild beast has devoured him.' We shall see what will become of his dreams." But Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, "Let us not kill him again." Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit in the desert, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father." So it came to pass, when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped the tunic of many colors off him. Then they took him and cast him into a pit, which was empty, for there was no water in it. They then sat down to eat a meal, and lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelite wayfarers coming from Gilead with their camels bearing spices, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carry them down to Egypt. So Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. But let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." And his brothers listened. Thus the Midianite traders passed by. And the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit. And they sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of gold. So they took Joseph to Egypt. Then Reuben returned to the pit. And when he saw Joseph was not in there, he tore his clothes. So he returned to his brothers and said, "The lad is not there. And I, where shall I go?" Thus they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the tunic in the blood. Then they sent the tunic of many colors and had it brought to their father and said, "We found this. Do you know whether it is your son's tunic or not?" So he recognized it and said, "This is my son's tunic. A wild animal has devoured Joseph and carried him off." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned for his son many days. Thus all his sons and daughters arose to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted, and he said, "I shall go down into the grave to my son in mourning." So his father wept for him. Now the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard. Judah and Tamar. It came to pass at the time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Eldulamite whose name was Hirah. Then Judah saw there was a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he married her and went into her. So she conceived and bore a son, and called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and called his name Onan. She conceived yet again and bore a son, and called his name Shelah. She was at Chezib when she bore them. Then Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was evil in the sight of the Lord, and God killed him. So Judah said to Onan, "Go into your brother's wife and marry her. And as her brother-in-law, raise up seed to your brother." But Onan knew the seed would not be his. And it came to pass that whenever he went into his brother's wife, he emitted his semen on the ground, lest he should give seed to his brother. But the thing he did appeared evil in the sight of the Lord. Therefore, he also put him to death. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown." For he said, lest he also die like his brothers. So Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. Now, in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died, and Judah was comforted and went up to his sheep shearers at Timnah. He and his shepherd, Hirah the Adulamite. So it was told Tamar, saying, "Look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep." Thus she took off her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, made herself beautiful, and sat down near the gates of Anan on the way past Timnah. For she saw Shelah was grown. She was not given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, because she had covered her face, and he did not recognize her. Then he turned to her by the way and said, "Let me come into you," for he did not know she was his daughter-in-law. For he did not know she was his daughter-in-law. So she said, "What will you give me that you may come into me?" He replied, "I will send a young goat from the flocks." So she said, "Will you give me a pledge till you send it?" Then he said, "What pledge shall I give you?" So she said, "Your ring and cord, and the staff in your hand." Then he gave them to her, and he went into her, and she conceived by him. So she arose and went away, and laid aside her veil, and put on the garments of her widowhood. Thus Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his shepherd, the Adulamite, to receive his pledge, from the woman, but he did not find her. Then he asked the men of that place, saying, "Where is the prostitute who was in Aenon by the roadside?" They replied, "There was no prostitute here." So he returned to Judah and said, "I cannot find her." Also the men of this place said, "There." Also the man of this place said, "No prostitute had been there." Then Judah said, "Let her have them, lest we should become a laughingstock. For I sent this goat, but you did not find her." Thus it came to pass about 3 months after, Judah was told, saying, "Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has committed fornication and is pregnant because of her adultery." So Judah said, "Bring her out and let her be burned." When she was brought out, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, "By the man of whom these belong, I am with child." So she said, "Determine whose these are, the ring, the cord, and the staff." So Judah now acknowledged him and said, "She has been more righteous than I, because I did not give her to Shelah, my son." But he never knew her again. Then it came to pass at the time for giving birth that, behold, the twins in her womb. So it was when she was giving birth that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it on his hand, saying, "This one came out first." Then it happened, as he drew back his hand, that his brother came out unexpectedly, and she said, "How did you break through? This breach be upon you." Therefore she called his name Perez. Afterward his brother came out with the scarlet thread on his hand. She called his name Zerah. Notes from the previous page, 37, 3, and 4. Israel's love was partial, for he loved Joseph more than his other son. Such love divided his family and opened the door to hatred. Thus Jacob was not yet perfected in love. For perfect love is impartial, but Christ loves all equally and died for all. 37, 8. Joseph's brothers were blinded by their hatred for him, and therefore could not understand the things of God. 37, 26, 27. Joseph's brothers were motivated by the love of money and possessions, for they did not know the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. 37, 28. Joseph's brothers cast him into a pit, then lifted him out and sold him as a slave into Egypt. However, he ultimately became the Lord of all Egypt. Similarly, Jesus was betrayed for 30 pieces of silver, was killed and buried in his grave, but he rose again and became the Lord of all. Acts 2:36, 10:36.